Hello and happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back to A Conversation With, a series from Sounding Board where we get to profile inspiring learning leaders. And I personally get to have some really interesting and fun conversations. Today, I'm especially excited to be welcoming Bernhard Ries. He is the former corporate strategist and executive coach from Intel. And we've had the opportunity to work with him over the last number of years and see firsthand some of the incredible work that he has done. And so, Bernhard, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And so I would love to just start with hearing a little bit about your background. And we always start the show with this question of what is your origin story? And so share away.
Yeah, origin story. It's a great question. So I guess I consider myself a product of, I would say, four cultures. And so it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. I'm originally from Germany. I grew up in Germany, but then spent a lot of my youth bouncing back and forth between Germany and South America. Spent 5 years in Argentina, then spent 6 years in Venezuela. So it was always like back and forth, back and forth. And those were formative years. So there's a little bit of the, adopted Latin American in me, Venezuelan kid. And then during my time in South America, I also got exposed to the US quite a bit. I spent a lot of summers in a summer camp in upstate New York in the Adirondacks because my parents were taking these huge trips across South America. I didn't want to be in the back of a van. So that was the US exposure. Then married a California girl, moved to Silicon Valley in 2006. So there's quite a strong US influence by now. And then the fourth piece is I have some cosmic connection to India. My wife's originally from India. My brother was born in India. We adopted our son from India. So there's something that draws me to that culture as well. So kind of, Germany, Latin America, US, India. And then both my parents were teachers, so that probably means that I got exposed to learning matters quite early in my life, and probably shaped a little bit of where I ended up. But then I was also always fascinated with technology from a very early age. And I remember building shortwave radio antennas on top of my house in Caracas in Venezuela to listen to German soccer broadcasts, that sort of stuff. Ended up studying computer science. And I guess part of what I was interested in is, kind of at this intersection of learning and technology, how can technology really make the world a better place? So
that's incredible. I think the better question is, what countries or continents do you not have a connection to?
Yeah, I think Africa is one that I need to explore a lot more. I've been to Africa, but not anywhere enough. So
And
yeah.
what grade or what were your parents teachers of?
My dad was a language and history teacher. My mom was an English teacher. So yeah, languages I think was a strong influence, and just like this, I think they shaped us to be just open to the world is the way I would look at it, right? Because my dad was he was the world traveler, quite frankly. Like he's just, he wanted to explore all the time. And then that made being a teacher such a valuable proposition because you have actually a lot of vacation if you're a teacher. So, you can go on long trips. So
yeah. Well, I think from what I've seen from my children's teachers, they work super hard during the year. And so they need those 3 months to be able to rejuvenate and get that energy to come back again.
That's right.
Well, Bernhard, I mean, I love this sort of global aspect to your background and your heritage. Could we make a little pivot and start to understand how do you think and where did that end up leading you into Intel, where you've spent actually a lot of your career in terms of time and also, I would say, in a pretty cross-functional and global capacity?
Yeah. So 30 years at Intel at the end of the day, actually in two stints. So started at Intel, not directly out of university, but relatively closely. Then, spent a couple of years there, left and came back. And it really I mean, it led me into coaching at the end of the day. Today, I'm a coach and I consider myself, that's what I do. But it's a bit of a non-traditional path into coaching. So as I said, I started as a technology person. I studied computer science, started at Intel as a software developer for supercomputers. At that time, we were chasing the first teraflop machine. So if you don't know what a teraflop is, that's 1 trillion floating point operations per second, which at that time, this is in 1992, was kind of the frontier that everybody was chasing. And this machine that we were building was 6,000 processors. It was 1,600 square feet, like a huge hunk of supercomputer. And then you look at it today, your mid-range iPhone has 2 teraflops in your pocket, right? So
I was just going to hold up my hand.
But that's how I started. And then software development, I think, it's a very creative pursuit, but it's also a bit of a lonely pursuit. So I was always more interested in working with people, which then led me to pivot more into technology marketing. And that's really where I spent the majority of my career at Intel in various marketing roles, including leading our Intel Inside program, this big program that put all the ads on, TV and the bong, like all that stuff, right? Working with our OEMs to get the brand message out. And then from there, I went into combining that interest in communications with the interest in technology. And I had an opportunity to stand up a market intelligence group at our company, which was really in charge of briefing our executive management on technology trends. So, which was actually one of the more fascinating jobs that I had, because it was basically, what's out there, and how do we bring it into our executive management to have interesting conversations. So we did stuff like in 2014, we had a Bitcoin exploration, right? And brought in Mark and Ries to talk about Bitcoin. I got all of our executive management to go actually purchase something with Bitcoin. At that time, Bitcoin was about $100. So I don't want to know how much money ultimately they spent in today's dollars. But so that was kind of the combine interest in technology with interest in communications. That then led me into more of a strategy role. I ended up in our corporate strategy office, leading the corporate strategy office for a couple of years. And then all the while, I'm interested in, that third dimension of leadership development. How do you develop people? How do you mentor people? Which then caused me to say, hey, I want to actually become a certified coach. So I went through the Hudson Institute coaching program, started coaching internally. Also in this corporate strategy role, had the opportunity to then put a little bit more resources into our coaching programs, because there's this intersection of strategy and culture.
Right.
And one thing I learned relatively early on in my marketing career is, this is from the then CMO of Kraft, who came in, did a talk at Intel that kind of stuck with me. It's like, if you ever want to sell something where you need money, just call it a pilot. So I really good advice, right? So I started this pilot for, how do we use coaching as a vehicle for culture change, got a little bit more resource to stand up, or I would say catalyze. We already had a pretty strong coaching program within Intel, but like structure it a little bit better. And then ended up actually joining that team and becoming a full-time executive coach at Intel. So, there is something really interesting, I think, at the intersection of those three things that I've done in my life of marketing, communications, leadership development, and strategy. Because there's, I think those three things, if you put them together, are very indicative of whether you're going to have business success or not, right? So being able to act as a coach kind of at the intersection of those three disciplines is something that I think is really fascinating and interesting.
Well, and I also think very relevant to some of the most critical capabilities that impactful leaders have, right? Yeah. The ability to think strategically, the ability to be able to develop and coach others to execute against that strategy. And then, of course, the ability to be able to very clearly articulate and convey those ideas, whether it's to the market, internally to a team or to influence others internally to be able to help you execute, right?
Yeah, that, and I would say also the, having the self-awareness, which is where coaching comes in, to really ask yourself the questions of where can I get better, where are the interventions that will ultimately make us better as a team, right? Whether that's in, as you said, communicating in a more compelling way, having a vision, and actually being able to communicate that to customers, to employees, to partners, to the market, to investors, and so on. Whether it's the, more the brain focused, like the hard stuff around strategy, competitive analysis, and so on, to have those capabilities. Or, I mean, what I find in my coaching, when people come, and as a strategist, they often come to me and say, hey, like, I want to get better at strategy. What they're really talking about is, how can I be a better leader? And it's back to those things that are at the core of coaching, of like, how can I build trust in my team? How can I manage conflict in the right way? How can I influence others, and so on? So it's a very fluid space, right? And being at the intersection of those three areas is super interesting to me.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get to this coaching program at Intel that you were part of, because it's an award-winning one, and I know a lot of people are curious about how you were able to do that. But before I get there, you said something very interesting, which was, you took on and had very big jobs. I don't think there's anybody, maybe my generation, that doesn't know the Intel Inside campaign and just how compelling that was from a business perspective. But you said that you always had this connection into wanting to better understand the leadership development and the coaching and the mentoring aspect of your role as a business leader. Is there any story that you can share about that? Or what was it about that was so interesting for you that you went into becoming a coach, and now that is your profession?
Yeah. I mean, many stories. I guess from my own very personal early on development, the first thing that comes to mind is just an amazing mentor that I had in my very first job at Intel. And he probably doesn't even think of himself as a mentor. He was like an older guy, but he just had this ability to instill his trust in me, into me, and just communicate that, right? Like, it's very visceral of this. Hey, you're going to be great. You're going to do what you're going to do. You go your path. You forge your path, and just being able to show that trust. And that's always, like, I've aspired to be that kind of person who can, both guide, but more importantly, open up the ability for others to actually forge their own path. I think that's on the positive side. On the the flip side of why leadership is so important. I mean, I've also seen, talking a little bit shop here at Intel, I'm no longer at Intel, so I think I'm allowed to say that. Intel's gone through some hard times, and it's an amazing company with an amazing culture, and the previous CEO, I think, didn't have the emotional intelligence, I think, to really lead the company in the right way. And you could see, like, being in the boardroom there, how the shift from one leader to the other just in no time changed the company in for the worse in that case. And then with other changes coming in, it's getting a lot better again now, right? But this notion of Daniel Goleman calls this mood contagion, of this, like, how I show up as a leader infects the entire company, for good or for bad. That's the other piece that I find super fascinating, and like what I can do to help leaders show up in a way that's authentic and positive, and ultimately brings the organization forward, and then through that also drives them forward. That's what I'm passionate about.
Amazing. And I think, all of us probably have similar experiences, right? Both of really experiencing incredible leadership that helped us elevate, and then others where, you felt like, oh, why am I not being successful, or why am I not being understood to be able to have the impact that, we all actually want in our roles?
Yeah.
Well, Bernhard, let's move and talk a little bit about this coaching program at Intel, because we've certainly seen it at Sounding Board and how impactful it has been. But can you just share a little bit, maybe a high level, what it is,
Yeah.
and tell us a little bit about, what were the goals behind that program, and what do you think contributed to its success?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the vision really behind it was to create a coaching culture, and those are big words, right? But this idea that if you have a coaching culture, then everybody should have access to coaching if and when they need it, and everybody should also be a coach and show up as a coach in whatever they do in their work, right? So that's really kind of the overriding ambition. And I think the benefit that Intel had is we had a pretty long-standing grassroots coaching program. So there's over 200 certified coaches internally that have gone through some form of accredited coaching education, ICF something. There's many programs in the world, around the world, right? And so there's a lot of resource there that's kind of or capability that was there internally. And then the idea behind the coaching program was, how do we combine that amazing resource with all the external coaching that's also going on, so that everything's coming from the same place, that we can reach more people, that we can show the impact and get like a self-sustaining mechanism going that really, keeps growing and growing. And then the way we approached it was to say, strategically, there's three paths. There's a effort around how do you get access to coaching? How do you get coached? There's an effort around how do you learn how to coach and become a coach? And again, that's not necessarily a certified coach, but just show up as a coach. And then there's, we called it governance and infrastructures, like how do you keep the machine together and keep it running? And then we went and just put together tiered offerings in each of those spaces, right? So for the get coached, we offered spot coaching, we offered one-on-one coaching, we offered group coaching, cohort leadership development programs, specific programs focused on diversity, also coaching for new parents, so a whole kind of suite of offerings. And then on the learn how to coach path, similar, so kind of easy entrance into coaching with a 2-day course that we call Coaching for Excellence. There was internal coach certification. We sent people to coaching school. We had scholarships, that sort of stuff, right? Again, so a tiered offering to grow the number of coaches. And then we tied it all together with this infrastructure effort. And that's, by the way, where Sounding Board came in and helped us a lot, because if you want to manage 200 plus internal coaches plus external coaching vendors, and you want to be able to show the impact and the ROI and get the results, you actually need a technology platform to help mediate that. And we work, as you know, very closely with you all to make that our platform that tied it all together. So that's a little bit of the structure. And then really you asked what were the success factors, and again, it's a little bit hard to grasp how far we've really come in this vision of making coaching systemic and creating a coaching culture, but we've I think come a long way. The key ingredient, I think, was ultimately community and building community. So put a lot of effort into both the coaching community and bringing that community together and having coaches talk to each other and get to know each other, and also communities of practice, right? So the people that went through our leadership development programs formed very strong connections and bonds, and then through those communities of practice, systematically spread the love of coaching, and especially in the last 2-3 years with COVID and everybody working from home, that yearning for community is very, very strong. So I would say that's probably the most important success ingredient. And then externally, the other thing I would say is at the end of the day, there's opportunity cost, right? For, you have to be able to sell the impact of coaching internally. So we also put a very strong focus on just being able to measure return on investment and put very specific metrics in place at each level. So, how many people are we reaching? What's the satisfaction with the programs? Are they learning? Are they changing behavior? What results are they getting? And ultimately, what's the ROI? That's always the holy grail, right? Like with dollar numbers. But we were able to demonstrate, I think, that just in terms of, for instance, ROI, greater than $1 billion in incremental revenue and savings. We looked at comparing promotion rates between people that had access to coaching versus others and had a 2.7x higher promotion rate. So I think it got the ball rolling to the point that we could really demonstrate that there's value here that's being delivered back to the company. But then most importantly, it's you have such a grassroots community that's actually keeping it going. Like, this is a flame that cannot be extinguished, I believe. Like, even if right now actually Intel's going through some austerity measures and pulling a bit back on the investment, but the culture is still there, and I think it will continue to go.
Bernhard, could you share, why do you think there was such a grassroots effort already? Because a lot of the things I think that oftentimes we hear, especially for folks in L&D, is getting that sponsorship or getting the sort of organizational commitment, right? Because a lot of the things you said, access, learning how to coach, investing in the infrastructure and technology, that takes organizational commitment to do. So anything you can share about that?
Yeah, I mean, Intel may be a little bit different there than other companies, because one of the things that distinguishes Intel is we have, I still say we, I'm still part of the family.
Always.
We have much higher tenure of people. People stay with this company for a long time. In that sense, like, me being there 30 years is not an outlier, right? Like, there's a lot of people that, are there for 15, 20, 25 years. And then we also had a culture of, you saw my career of, like, going from engineering to marketing to strategy to leadership development, right? Of this internal development, and like almost you can forge your own path. You're not tied into a specialty. At the intersection of those two things, you get the people that are coaches that stay with it for a long time, and you get this idea of development is in your, and learning and development is part of your job, right? While Intel, I think, is special in that sense, I think those two things can be translated, right? I would say one of the most important things, if you want to build a coaching program, is to have some form of focus on longevity, and identify those people that really care about the practice, and again, like, build that community, and then have that community self-sustain, number one. And then the other piece is, again, like, what's your orientation as a company towards learning, and and having people not receive learning but seek out learning, right? In the sense of where they want to take their careers and their development. And then, coaching can be a catalyst to that.
I think the community point can't be underscored enough, because what I think is very distinct that I'll sort of pull out for all the listeners is community was critical for the coaches themselves, right? People often think of the recipient of coaching as the beneficiary of it, and that we're doing this for those leaders. But there has been an incredible, I think, focus on the community for the folks that are actually the practitioners, the internal coaches within Intel. And that has become so powerful for someone like you. It's turned into your post-Intel career, right? And I do think that when we think about development opportunities, we often forget that there's actually learning for both sides and for both parties.
Yeah. And that's core to being a coach, is how do you develop yourself as a coach, and you develop so much by learning from others and being in community with others. And so we put a lot of effort into, conferences and calls and learning opportunities for the coaches, and sharing opportunities where, coaches had stipends like $2,000 a year to, develop whatever development they wanted to have as a coach. But then the expectation was they bring that back and they share it with the community and so on. So that's a big piece.
And you talked a little bit about this idea that, even as the business ebbs and flows, you've confidence, or, you can see that some of this is sticking. And you had said, you have a perspective around how do you actually make L&D programs that stick? So do you think community was part of that? Is there anything else you want to share about what you've learned?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit into my marketing brain here for this one. So there's this, do you know Seth Godin, marketing guru? Written a lot of books, Purple Cow and so on and so forth. He has this killer blog. If you read one of his blog entries, it's called the Needle Device and the Baby Rattle. It's like, best marketing advice ever. Have you heard about that one?
No, I haven't, but I got a chance to meet Seth Godin in person and just found the experience incredible.
Right. It goes like this, very simple. How do you make a message stick? There's three ways marketers can go. You can use a needle approach, which is be very targeted, very precise on who you want to reach, and that's how your message goes through, right? Pinpoint. There's the Ries approach to marketing, which is broad message, target a lot of people, just apply a lot of pressure, and again, your message will sink in. And then he says there's what marketers often do, which is the baby rattle approach, which is I'm going to try something, I'm going to baby rattle, throw the rattle out of the pram because this didn't work. And then, what happens. And unfortunately, we do too much baby rattling. And then he says, the best marketers combine the needle with the Ries, right? So, very targeted and a lot of pressure. And that, I think, is my, if you apply it to learning and development and how do you make programs stick, that's where I would say, apply that wisdom, right? Because, let's say the needle, the message, it's probably not that hard. There's a lot of good learning content, and it's just taking best of breed, and we all know what the issues are, right? Trust, conflict, influence, and so on and so forth. Just that core, that's not that hard. The Ries, right? It's like, how do you make it stick and how do you apply the pressure? That's, I think, where community comes in. That's where the building that culture, building the core of people that will spread the message. That can be your Ries approach. And then the thing you want to avoid, which I've seen too many learning development organizations do, and frankly at Intel we were also guilty of that, is the reinvent the wheel all the time, right? Which is the baby rattle, right? So I would just say find something that works and then stick with it, because then you also build over time, you build shared language, you build, a community of practitioners that have received all the same, kind of message. And through that, you build culture and you build stickiness.
Yeah. And I think it's very reflective of also your background in strategy, right? Because in order to really affect strategy, you do have to have a commitment around it, and you have to give it enough time as you implement and execute, right? Yep. So, well, Bernhard, I can't believe we're at the end of time already. We've got 1 minute left. If you had to offer any advice for the folks out there, especially folks in L&D, you talked a little bit about disruptive times and challenging times in the market. Any advice and parting words you want to leave our guests with?
Yeah, I would say maybe 3 things. One, I've stressed a lot, which is, again, find ways of building community and connection. That's probably the biggest piece. Then the second piece, you mentioned disruptive times. It's this notion of embrace change, right? Things are changing. And I love this quote of, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So embracing change in the sense of new technology. We all know, AI is coming and it's going to transform coaching. It's going to transform learning and development. Neuroscience, there's so much that we're learning about the human brain, and never forget that we're ultimately people working with people. And so, being at the edge of that intersection of new technology. And then I would say it's like learning and development. My perspective would be, focus on development, right? And letting people develop and chart their own path, and the learning will follow. So, and that again is, where coaching is so important, right? Because coaching is ultimately a development instrument. That leads to learning, right? So I would almost want to reverse the L&D acronym and making D like a big D and a little bit of an L, if you will, right? Because learning, we can, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of platforms and so on and so forth. Development is the piece that matters.
Well, I love that. And so not only have we learned all about some of the work you've done, we've coined a new phrase for the category that we play in. It's going to be D&L from now on. We love that because we are also all about development at Sounding Board. And so thank you again, Bernhard. I really enjoyed the conversation today. And thank you again for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for having me.